Welcome to the Modern Arizona podcast. Today's podcast is a little different. It's from one of our live events with the Modern Divorce Navigator, designed to make divorce less stressful and more manageable. If you enjoy the podcast, don't forget to subscribe. And if you're curious about the Navigator, check out the link in the description. We would love to have you join us. Now let's dive back into the episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our show, our live event with Tessa Noel, who is Coach Kind Mama, divorce coach, and online personality extraordinaire. Tessa, welcome.
Hi, thank you, Billie. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. So tell people who don't know you a little bit about your background.
Okay, so I am a certified divorce coach and co-parenting specialist. I have personally been divorced for 7 years. And it was through my own journey through high conflict divorce. My divorce went to trial, which not a lot of divorces do. That gave me the passion to work with other parents who are going through high conflict divorce. And now that's what I do all day long. So, here I am talking about how to reduce conflict through communication and anything else that I can offer your viewers to help them if they're going through a high conflict divorce.
I think I'm also about 7 years out. And how long did it take you and your co-parent to kind of transition from mortal enemies?
Well,
where everything you read, means something different,
Right. The thing is you don't have to wait for your co-parent to come around. You can do it without them. It's basically a mindset shift, right? Like, okay, I'm going to have the kind of co-parenting relationship I want, whether my co-parent's on board or not. And I'm going to be professional, friendly, cooperative, whether or not they're going to or not. So it was really a mindset shift for me. Once we were done with the trial, the custody evaluation, and then just everything, the dust kind of settled. And I was like, well, this is the ideal kind of co-parenting relationship I want for my children. And this is what I want to be modeling for my children at my house. And they don't necessarily have to be on board with that. You just start doing it. Right. And so that's what I just started doing it. And no, we don't have blended family birthday parties. And we don't have family vacations together, but that's okay because I'm happy and my children are happy. And it just all kind of worked out. We kind of stay in our lane. A little bit of parallel parenting, a little bit of GPT in our talking parents messages. Oh, yeah, that's what works for our family.
Got it. Okay. So would you say you're still pretty icy?
I would say icy. Yeah.
Icy. Okay.
But
so if you guys are
at my end, because I'm like, I'm always like, hello, co-parent, hope you're having a great holiday. And then I always with a, have a nice day or thank you, not on my end.
Do you find that you're at the same events? Do your kids have events that you end up at where you're seeing each other, multiple times a week?
Yes. Like school events, especially what just happened, right? So all of the Christmas plays and the choir and everything. And yeah, we're amicable. Like we'll sit in the same row, but not next to each other.
Got it. Yeah. Yes. Some people in between, right?
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, it seems like a good general plan. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So one of the things I'm most interested in talking to you about is this concept of when to be flexible,
right,
and when to hold a boundary. I think this is probably one of the most difficult things for people to determine.
For sure. Especially if you're coming out of a relationship dynamic where maybe you were always the one to be flexible because you knew that that's what you had to do to keep the peace. But now that you're divorced or separated, you're moving forward in a new kind of relationship. You can leave the expectations that were in the marriage kind of behind, and you don't have to be the one that's constantly bending over backwards to accommodate your co-parent, especially when it's not respecting your boundaries, right? Because That's what you're trying to step into your single self after this relationship has ended. And you're like, okay, I'm going to learn to set boundaries. But then, you're expected to constantly be flexible with your co-parents, changes in the schedule, pick up time. But how are you supposed to move on with your life if you're living in this boundaryless dynamic? So that's what my clients were constantly, especially the ones that were going through family court, right? Because then they were saying, I want to be flexible, but I'm exhausted. Like they're requesting changes, modifications to the parenting plan every single week. And I can't do that. I can't work. I can't live my life. And so I came up with a framework. It's called my Kind Mama Boundaries Decision Tree. And it's just 3 questions that you ask yourself. Like when your co-parent is asking to switch weekends, or your co-parent wants to cancel the visit or take your parenting time, first thing I want you to ask yourself is, how does this affect the children? Right? Is this benefiting them? And so let's take an example where your co-parent, their time starts at 8 a.m. on Friday, but they're consistently 20 to 30 minutes late every single Friday to pick them up. And it's gotten to the point where it's making you late for work and your boss says you can't be late again, right? This is a clear sign that you need to set a boundary, but you don't want to take away their parenting time because it benefits the children to see their other parent, right? So what are you going to do? So you're going to use the boundary setting decision tree. You're going to ask yourself, how does this benefit the children? Well, does it benefit the children if you're out of a job? Absolutely not, right? So then the next question you're going to ask yourself is, how is this considering my own time and energy? And I would encourage your viewers to write these questions down, right? Because these are the questions that are constantly my clients are coming to me with. So how does this benefit the children? And then does this consider my own time and energy? No, it's not, right? It's not considering your own time and energy. It's not considering your work schedule. And then especially if you have an attorney, especially if you're going through family court, what would a professional say? What would your attorney say? And you might need to bring it to them. You might need to bring it to your divorce coach or your attorney and say, is it okay if I do this? Do I need to accommodate them again? And help you come up with a solution, right? And so what would a solution to that would look like? Maybe setting a boundary with your co-parent and saying, I've noticed for the past 4 weeks consistently, you've been late to pick up the children. And I still very much want you to be able to have that your parenting time. But moving forward, if you're more than 30 minutes late again, I'm going to drop them off at my mom's across town and you're going to have to pick them up from there because I can't be late for work again. So you have to move forward with what's going to work for your family, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That seems like a no-brainer to me. If you have to leave by a certain time to get to work, you're either there and you pick up the kids or I have to drop them off.
Right.
And I need to move up my time now because now I have to build in the fact that I may have to stop at my mom's to drop them off,
Exactly. Right. So hopefully using that framework, people can come up with their own solutions.
Yeah.
Right. Just first and foremost, how does this affect the children? And then they can apply it to all kinds of situations. My co-parent is asking to take the kids on vacation, but it falls on my parenting time, right? Let's run it through the boundary decision tree. How does it affect your children? Would it benefit the children to go on a vacation with their other parent? Absolutely. So, I mean, you could stop right there and be like, yeah, take the kids. We'll make up my time later. So it just kind of depends on, your family dynamic, right? But it is hard. It's hard.
It's hard in this situation because you're not even, like, when you are going through a divorce or when you're in family court, you're not even asking yourself, should I let my kiddo go on vacation? You're thinking about 1,000 other things.
Right.
What will the court say if I don't? Is he asking just because he knows that it's important to me to do blah, 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 and he's trying to get on? Like, there's so many other things going on that make it difficult for you to see the problem. The problem is just, for whatever reason, he's not getting there on time to pick up, and you got to get to work.
Right.
How you going to fix it? But it's just so steeped in other things.
Yeah. Yes. And people are so, especially if they're in a high conflict co-parenting dynamic, especially if they're going through the family court, they're so completely overwhelmed with all of the questions that you just mentioned. Like, are they
Yeah.
trying to take my parenting
Right.
time? Are they trying to do this?
Yep.
That it's so overwhelming. They can't even narrow it down to what's best for the children in this situation.
Right. And what's the actual decision I'm being asked to make?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So,
It's real. Like, this is real.
right. Yeah.
And being in family court, I think, makes it 1,000 times more difficult.
It really
or
is.
having a legal battle or a legal strategy. So let's say you haven't even filed, but you know you want a modification. Now you're looking at every single co-parenting through the lens of, but I want a modification.
Right. Yes. Yeah. And those, thinking of their ulterior motives, thinking of your outcomes, it can all it becomes overwhelming and it blurs the lines. And, that's where I come in.
Yes. Yes. Okay. So let's go over the framework again.
Yes.
Does it benefit the children?
Yes.
Does it negatively impact?
Does it consider my own time and energy?
Does it consider my own time and energy? And what's the third?
What would a professional say?
What would a professional say? And how would they know how to answer that last one?
That's the thing. If they get through the first two and they still can't come up with their own answer, it might be time to consult your attorney, write that email to your attorney, or reach your divorce coach, or whoever you're working with. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really good.
Answered in the first question. Is this beneficial to the children?
Yeah. If it's not, the answer should be no.
Yeah. And then you end right there.
I mean, it's really easy if that answer is no. If the answer is no, the answer is no.
Absolutely.
But if it's good for them, then it's like, okay, but what else?
Yes.
And and then if you're in litigation, you've got this third thing of, what will this decision do to my case? Which is unfortunately something that people do need to be thinking about.
Absolutely. Right. And I mean, that's why I tell my clients to keep everything in writing. Just in case that there's something that they need to prove, or in case that they need to prove that they did everything they could, to try to come up with a solution to this incident before they took it to family court. Right.
Yeah.
And so you would be kind of negotiating through an app, hopefully, but keeping all of that in writing. Yeah.
One of the other conundrums is that family court really does not promote a positive co-parenting relationship, because if you want sole decision making, you can't have a healthy co-parenting relationship.
Right.
And so what do you tell your clients who are in that situation? They don't actually want a good co-parenting relationship. They want evidence.
Right. Oof. So then they would be, still keep it in writing, right? Because you're going to be able to prove it. That's the only way, right? So keep all communication through an app or email, but then also make sure that you're not creating evidence against yourself.
Right. Yeah.
And what do you have to do? You have to use my kind method, right? To make sure that your communication to your co-parent is on point and is not creating evidence against yourself. And then maybe with a little ChatGPT AI thrown in. And I can go over my kind method.
Yes. What's the kind method? Tell us.
This is I'm kind mama. I came up with this framework so that you're not creating evidence against yourself. So that when you go and you've got these, talking parents messages printed out and you're showing them to the judge, it's not going to make you look bad. And you have to do this with every written communication that you get from your co-parent. You have to sort through that paragraph that they sent you to try to trigger you, to try to trick you. And you have to sort through it and find the only thing that you need to respond to. And ask yourself, does it even require a response? Or can I just, and if it's pertaining to the children's schedule or something that's time sensitive, you do. But once you respond, you're going to use the KIND. K is for keep it short, right? As concise as possible. Only respond to the one thing that they're asking, which maybe it's pickup time or something. And so just K, keep it short. Information only provide the information that they're asking for. Maybe it's like, can we switch pick up to 9:30? And then hi co-parent, yes, 9:30 is great. The end. Don't bring up, by the way, you were 5 days late paying child support. Like, don't give them anything else.
No mixing issues.
No, stop. Just that info only. Nice, customer service friendly. If anyone's ever been in sales, you know how to do it. Co-parent, provide the information and then close with a thank you or have a nice holiday. And then B, determines the end of the conversation. So it's either going to be a closing statement or it's going to provide two options. So 9:30 doesn't work for us. We can do 8 or 10:30, right? And by providing them with options, it looks like maybe they're in charge. Maybe they get to choose, right? So that's my kind framework. It's K, keep it short, I, info only, N, nice, and D, determines the end of the conversation. Okay. And that prevents you from going into a spiral where you're looking like you're the high conflict co-parent and you're creating evidence against yourself by going into a tangent maybe about their new partner or how they forgot to, bring the children's hoodies home last time they dropped them off. So, yeah.
So one of the things people struggle with is when they get a message from their co-parent and it's not like that. It's not kind. And it instead is this blathering long accusation of all these things. And they're trying to determine what do I need to respond to? They've made all these accusations. Do I need to defend myself? What answers do I need to give?
Right. And I would say that determines like what is it an accusation of? Like, is it a blanket accusation of, oh, you're being a terrible co-parent. You're a bad mom. You moved on too fast. You were probably cheating on me during the time of marriage. Like, I don't believe that those things actually need responses. But if it's something specific, like having to do with your case, then maybe just a very short response, still in the same, using the same framework. Keep it short regarding your allegation of me taking your parenting time. That's not true. You don't need to actually explain why it's not true to the person that's making up the story, right?
True.
But probably should have a little response refuting that allegation. Just so it's, you're the expert. What would you say?
Yes, but you don't have to do it again and again and again and again. Because this is what happens. Like, you get the same accusations hurled at you.
Yes.
Especially if you're in litigation again and again and again. And you can just say, I've already addressed this.
Right. Or we already talked about this 2 months ago.
And 2 months ago. And what, there are some times when you feel like you've addressed the same thing for years. And you just have to stop and say, done. That's over. I've done that.
And they're doing it just to get a response out of you, just to trigger you, just to get a paragraph back, because they know it worked in the past. They know. I can throw out this little topic. Well, remember when you did this, and they know they're going to get an emotional response, and that's what they're looking for. They want that. Oh, haha, got her or got him. So that's what they're doing. And once you recognize that, and don't play into it, and just sit in your peace, knowing that you didn't do what they're accusing you of. And in order to get to the point where you're getting in trouble, you're literally going to be sitting in a courtroom and you're going to be able to prove that you didn't do it. Right?
Yep.
So,
let's see. I've got lots of questions from people within our support group. I often feel drained after my interactions with my co-parent. How do you recommend recharging and protecting myself emotionally so I can stay present for my kids when I just feel nothing but exhaustion?
I would say if you're feeling exhausted, that's a clear sign that you need to start setting boundaries. And a great boundary to set with your co-parent is just having co-parenting hours, right? You're not going to check those talking parents messages at all hours of the night. I put my phone on do not disturb. I don't check messages after 10 p.m. And there's only a certain period of the day where I do, because I don't want to check a message and have it ruin my entire day. Well, I don't let them do that anyways, but it's okay to have co-parenting hours, just like you don't check work emails when you're at home with your family. If you're in the middle of a holiday, adventure with your children and you get a talking parents message, maybe don't check it and not forever, but have a specific time when you are giving them access to you. And if you're constantly talking on the phone and having conversations, and maybe switch to a parenting app. And that's a great boundary to have as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I think being in person is going to be a lot more draining. But I love the idea of co-parenting hours. That's a great tip.
Yeah, especially if you're in a high conflict dynamic, you don't have to always let them have access to you.
Mm-hmm. My co-parent refuses to stick to our parenting plan, frequently asks for or changes the schedule last minute. How do I approach this without escalating into conflict?
Again, that's where you would use my co-parenting boundary decision tree, right? And number 2, does this consider my own time and energy? If you're constantly being asked for your parenting time, or making sacrifices, changing the pickup time, it's okay to politely say no. And you don't say absolutely not. You're constantly changing. So you just politely say, let's stick to the parenting plan for now.
Yeah. And I think in the beginning, that's really, really important. Like, you can have more flexibility after you have a new relationship, but it takes time to have a new relationship, to go from being a couple that was married, that was breaking and fighting, to functioning co-parents who have their own lives. Like, that takes some time. And so certainly in the beginning, I think having stricter boundaries helps everybody, including maybe even the kids.
For sure. Kids thrive on structure and routine. And if they're constantly being, we switched weekends, and you're going to be with dad this weekend, or you're going to be with mom this weekend. I know, but we made it. No, right. Especially right in the beginning, you need a clearly crafted, beautiful boundaried parenting plan that tells you exactly when the kids are going to be with what parent. And you need to be not straying from that until you kind of move into a relationship where you can be more accommodating with each other. And you have to give the children time to get used to it.
Yeah. So I want to talk about that. You know, the advice is always keep the children out of it, which is absolutely great advice. But sometimes you have teenagers who have real opinions and about where they are, or what they're doing, or whether or not they're doing this vacation instead of this.
Right.
How do you determine when to bring your children into the conversation?
Right. So I use a framework with my clients. It's called the Santa Claus method. And you're just determining what you're going to be speaking with your children about, based on their developmental, based on their age, or where they are. So kind of you gauge it, like, do they still believe in Santa? When have you had the how babies are made conversation with them yet? So when they're that young, when they do still believe in the magic of Santa, you're obviously not giving them a choice. You're giving them a voice, but not a choice. But then also you're going to be very, very careful about the details of the divorce and separation, because young children still internalize things, and they still see their parents as themselves, right? So if you say something potentially harmful to your child, like your mom is dumb or your dad is a cheater, they're going to think, I'm dumb, I'm a cheater. But at the same time, they're not developed enough to be able to choose what parent they want to live with, right? So you kind of use that principle and you apply it to everything. Yeah. But then also, again, even a 12 or 13-year-old, you give them a voice, but not a choice. They still need routine. They still need boundaries. They still need structure, especially with, teenagers. They might they're going to test your boundaries. They're going to ask you, well, why did you and dad get divorced? Or they're going to flat out say something like, did dad cheat on you? And you're going to have to set a boundary with your child. And you're going to say, I'm not going to talk to you about what happened in the marriage between your dad and I. Those are adult topics. It's, none of your business. It's okay to have boundaries with your kids, but you are ultimately protecting them from harmful details. Even older children should not know
with you.
Those harmful details.
I agree with you. That has nothing to do with them.
Absolutely
Even
not.
when they're 16, like it's one thing to say, I know next week you're usually with me, but dad wants to take you on vacation. Do you want to go? That's very different from dad says you blah, 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 blah. Did you?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's just it's so hard as a parent trying to figure out how to talk to your kids and what not to say. And
right. And if that's the question, if it's a did you do blah, 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 that's a hard one because you don't want to lie to your kids, right? And you usually want to answer their questions, but if it's complex, right? And that answering the question is going to require you to go into lots of details about the state of your marriage and what was going on at the time. That's just not a conversation you can have. So what do you say?
Yeah, I say set that boundary. You don't have to talk to your teenage child about why your marriage ended. You don't have to owe anyone an explanation.
Right.
Frankly.
Right.
Yeah. But it is important to even protect older children from details because they still identify with their parent. This is still someone who created them. They makes up half of them. And that's why, in my children's book, Stella's Two Homes, I emphasize the importance of both homes, both parents. You are literally made up from both your parents. And no matter what they did to hurt your other parent, they're still part of you. Right. So
the other thing that I think it's okay to say is like relationships are hard.
Yeah.
Especially to teenagers. You know that. You've been in relationships, even with friends, and you know they can be hard. They're even harder, when you're married and there's a lot there and you're going to experience these things.
Yeah.
So just like zooming out for them and making that safe can be good because they do know that. They do know what it's like to be in a very complicated situation with a crush or girl drama or whatever it might be.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you don't know, if you're caught off guard, if you're driving a minivan and one of them shouts up like, hey, mom, blah, 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 blah. And you're like, what? What?
I don't know about that. Yeah.
Come back to it. Change the subject and say, and go get counsel from your therapist or someone and say, how do I talk to my child about this?
Yeah. Stall tactics are good.
Yes. Yes, because that's what happens. That's real life. You're caught off guard and you go, I don't know how to answer this.
Right. And so definitely don't.
Don't try to do it on your own. Yeah.
I have another question here from our viewer. How do we handle kids' cell phones? Are you able to have phones that go between homes? The co-parent has the child use the phone to give private information to them.
Oh.
This breaks privacy standards between the co-parents.
That's tricky, right? Because you have to set a boundary with your co-parent. You have to have a discussion with your child. There's so many things. There's what is that? The Bark phone.
Mm-hmm.
It's got all the safety features on it. And if you are in a cooperative co-parenting dynamic, have the phone go back and forth and have it be a special kind of like a Bark phone. But when it comes to like using the phone for spying or sharing information, that is whole different topic. That's not just safety around electronics. That is one of the parents being manipulative. And that boundary needs to be set there. So,
okay. So what would you
down to boundaries? I mean,
how would you do that?
If you don't want the behavior to continue, you're going to have to confront your co-parent in a professional, friendly way first, but firm, and say, it's been brought to my attention that A, B, and C, and have a solution. And if you're not able to resolve it on your own, you're going to have to maybe go to private mediation or talk to your attorney about it. Because that's a nasty game that co-parents play, and you can't let it continue, right? So
Right. Because what has really happened is the child has been put in a terrible position where
absolutely.
they have been recruited by one parent to rebel against, spy on, defy, disrespect the other parent. Like you have a completely broken co-parenting relationship at that point that is really, really bad for your child.
Yes, for sure. And that's a terrible thing to do your child. It creates this loyalty conflict where your child doesn't, where your child is being forced to choose.
Yeah.
And you don't ever want to put your child in that situation. Your child is being forced to betray the trust of the other parent. And your child should always feel like they're allowed to love both parents equally, always. And so when they are being put in that situation, it's really just hurting your child. So
Last question. Do you have any tips for or framework for how to free children from those loyalty conflicts?
unfortunately, you can't just let it go. You're gonna have to bring it up with your co-parent. You're gonna have to set a boundary, and you're going to have a consequence, right? Because it is essentially child abuse, right? And your child is being harmed by their other parent. So you do have to call them out on it, and you have to set a boundary there. And you have to be proactive about it. And it might get messy, and you have to be okay with what's the absolute worst thing that could happen in the situation. I'm going to end up back in family court, and you have to be willing to be okay with that.
Ooh,
Because that's how serious it is.
it is. Because if your child's spying on you, something else is going on. It's not about the spying.
Right.
There's some big plan to prove XYZ or change the parenting plan or whatever. And that's the thing that needs to be confronted is really what you're saying.
Right. So you have to face your own fear of probably confronting your co-parent about it and being okay with taking it all the way, because you're identifying your child is being hurt in this situation. And you cannot allow that to keep it. Your job as a parent is to protect your child. And I just recently worked with a client who had same kind of situation. Co-parent was talking to the children about potentially moving in with the other parent and switching school districts. And I asked her before we even started working together, I said, are you prepared to take this as far as it needs to go? Because you've been just kind of hands off, not, saying anything, but now your children are involved. And do you feel strongly that they're being harmed to where you're willing to pursue this and be okay if you're ending up back in family court? And she said, absolutely, yes, it has to stop. And so we worked together, and we used a little bit of ChatGPT to do some talking parents messages. And she was able to confront him and stop the behavior, which, yes,
that's a win.
Was a win. Yes, for sure. So,
okay, I said that was the last question, but I have one more. So you talk a lot about using AI and using ChatGPT. It's one thing to say go use ChatGPT, but what are people supposed to do?
Okay. First, if you're going to use ChatGPT in your communications with your co-parent, I want you to use it responsibly. So I want you to familiarize yourself with it first. So you can, open up the ChatGPT app and tell it to write you a gluten-free meal plan for the week, including a shopping list, and it will. You can tell it to write your daughter a bedtime story in the voice of a Disney princess, and it will. But I want you to see how it works. I want you to familiarize yourself with it before you start using it for co-parenting communication. And then I want you to use it responsibly. And what I mean by that is you're not just going to be sending paragraph long AI created messages to your co-parent or to your co-parent's attorney, racking up their bill, nonsensical, circular conversations. Plug it into the kind method, keep it short, provide the information only, keep it nice, and edit for heaven's sake, edit it, right? Don't just take a raw ChatGPT message and push send,
Yeah.
copy and
That's
paste.
not a good exhibit for me. Like, you are creating exhibits when you communicate. And
Yeah.
if the exhibit that you've created, everybody knows was written by ChatGPT because it says in conclusion in the final paragraph, like, I can't use that.
Right. So yeah, put it in your own voice. Use my kind method. Keep it short, information only, nice, determines the end of the conversation. But then look at it and say, is this something that I would actually write in my own voice? Like, does it sound like me? Am I using their actual name? Does it say literally, dear co-parent?
Right.
So
You're
yeah,
right.
edit it, shorten it, and use it responsibly.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here. How do people find you if they want to work with you?
So you can go to my website, kindmamadivorcecoaching.com. You can follow me on my socials. I'm on TikTok and Instagram as Coach Kind Mama. You can buy my children's book on Amazon. It's called Stella's Two Homes by Tessa Noel. And yeah.
And the Stella is a half fairy, half mermaid, which I think is so cool.
It is really, it's actually a pleasant bedtime story, like book that will help your child transition after divorce or separation. And it doesn't mention divorce in the book, so it's good for parents who are never married. And it's a great way to gauge how your children are doing during the divorce or separation, because it's got discussion questions, and it's just a pleasant little story about a little girl who's a mermaid at dad's house and a fairy at mom's house.
Fun.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. All right. Thank you so much for being here. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you for having me on.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks so much for listening to the Modern Arizona podcast. If you've enjoyed what you've heard today, make sure to download it, like it, leave a review, and share it with your friends. If you know someone who would be a good guest, or you would like to be on the Modern Arizona podcast, make sure to give us an email or reach out to us at mymodernlaw.com.